2025 review continued, a year of writing. I look back over this year not as a calendar of dates, but as a trail of words, chapters written, prayers whispered onto the page, and stories that unfolded one careful paragraph at a time. This was not just a year of writing. It was a year of discernment, imagination, correction, and growth. The year begins in listening. When I began, I did not start with plot twists or polished prose. I started with listening. Much of my writing this year grew out of spiritual wrestling, questions about faith, obedience, calling, and truth. Before chapters even began, there were prayers. And after chapters ended, there were prayers again. Writing became an act of reverence, not just creativity. Each chapter felt like a small step taken with intention. I learned to pause before the words, to ask that what followed would be honest, scripturally grounded, and shaped by humility rather than ego. In that rhythm, before and after, I discovered that writing itself could be a form of devotion. Building a story that could bear weight. As the months progressed, the work expanded into long-form storytelling. The narrative grew darker in tone at times, brushing against horror and spiritual conflict, yet it never lost its moral gravity. The story did not exist merely to frighten or entertain, it existed to reveal. Characters were not rushed. They were tested. Micah, in particular, became a mirror for something deeper. His growing spiritual sensitivity was not treated as a gift without cost, but as a burden that required discernment, courage, and truth. I slowed the story down intentionally, revisiting chapters to ensure that what was being portrayed aligned with Scripture rather than borrowing hollow spiritual language. World building was not about spectacle. It was about coherence, making sure the unseen rules were consistent, the spiritual realities truthful, and the consequences real. Revision is an act of faithfulness. One of the most important lessons this year was learning when to redo, revise, or pause entirely. Not everything needed to move forward quickly. Sometimes the right choice was to step back and ask, is this accurate? Is this honest? Does this glorify confusion, or does it point toward truth? Redoing chapters was not failure, it was stewardship. I learned that faithfulness in writing often looks like restraint. I chose depth over speed, integrity over momentum. Chapters that became milestones. The sheer number of chapters written this year is significant, but more important is what they represent. Each set of chapters marked a stage of growth. Early chapters established tone and spiritual posture. Middle chapters tested consistency, character development, and theological grounding. Later chapters carried greater weight, allowing events to unfold naturally rather than being forced. By the time the story reached its later arcs, I could feel the difference. The narrative had learned how to breathe. What 2025 has taught me? This year taught me that writing is not separate from who I am becoming. It taught me that imagination must be submitted to truth if it is to endure. It taught me that prayer and storytelling do not compete, they strengthen one another. Most of all, it reminded me that the purpose of these written works is not completion alone, but transformation, first in the writer, and eventually in the reader. Looking forward. As I move into 2026, I do not feel rushed to finish everything. I feel prepared to continue. There are still chapters to write, themes to deepen, and truths to handle carefully. But the foundation has been laid. The voice is clearer. The discipline is stronger. And the work now knows what it is trying to become. This year was not just a collection of written works. It was a testimony in progress.